Thank you, Ken. Welcome all to the Media and Technology District Committee. My name is Mike Metcalf. I'm the Interim Chief Officer for Academics and Student Support Services. I apologize for the delay of the start of the meeting, a little technology problem there, but we now got that working. This meeting is being live streamed. The meetings of this committee are considered official meetings of a public body and therefore must be publicly noticed, which they were, and open to the public, which they are through by being live streamed. Each of us has been appointed to by the Moore County School Board of Education per policy regulation 5410R, and each of us fulfills a particular role as defined in that policy. Some of us are media specialists, some of us are parent reps, some of us are teacher reps, some of us are student reps. I am representing the superintendent, and Donna Gephardt is representing the media specialist supervisor. First, thank you very much for your willingness to serve on behalf of the superintendent, Dr. Locklear. We really appreciate your energy and expertise and your willingness to serve in this particular role. So thank you very much for being willing to do this. I think we have 3 meetings scheduled. We have agendas for each of those meetings. Our purpose today is to re-examine all documents from the original reconsideration made by the Building Level Media and Technology Committee at Mcdeeds Creek Elementary School on the book George by Alex Gino. I believe that everyone has already received a copy of the book and had an opportunity to review the book, read the book. We've also received other documentation that went along with that, including the request for reconsideration, the request for building level review, a copy of the policy. There are a couple of people that I want to especially thank. One is Donna Gephardt, who's coordinated much of this work, and of course Kent Eklund from our technology department, who's coordinating all the live stream and all the work behind that. Melody Thomas, who is the media specialist of West Pine Middle School and one of our lead media specialists, she has graciously and courageously agreed to chair the committee. So we appreciate Melanie's willingness to do that. Each of us has very different and diverse backgrounds, which is wonderful. We all have different ideas and thoughts and concerns and perspectives that we bring to the table today. We want to hear all of those. We want to hear everybody's ideas. We want all of those backgrounds and thoughts and concerns and ideas to come forward. We've developed a process and some protocols that we hope will allow us to capture and hear all of those different perspectives. And Melody is going to lead us through that process, provide a little bit of background information, and then lead us through those protocols and processes. So we'll turn it over to you, Melody. Thomas.
Okay, and what I'm actually going to do is start by sharing the screen. As soon as it allows me. Sorry, talk about technical difficulty. I was not planning on doing this part, so getting this worked out. I apologize, it is not letting me choose the window that I need to share. What, are you all seeing a calendar at this moment?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I have to get this to disappear for me. I apologize.
I think we've clogged Zoom.
I know, right? I cannot get it to disappear.
Can you make me host now, or?
I can try. I am. Okay, you can see it now?
No. I still see your calendar.
Okay. Can you see the agenda now?
Yes.
Very good. I think we're set then.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So what we're going to do is start with the overview of the Moore County Schools Board Policy and Regulation. For today, we will go into more detail than we will in the future meeting. But because this is our first time together, we're going to go into more detail. So this is the board policy regulation for media and technology selection procedures. The first part addresses the responsibility for selecting media and technology. And this basically is saying, I'm sorry, we were letting somebody else back in. This is basically saying that this decision is delegated to the schools, to the media specialist and the team at a school. Then the next part is focusing on the objectives for selecting media and technology, and I am going to read some of these parts. The primary objective of each school's library, media, and technology program is to enrich and support the instructional program of the school and to ensure that students and staff are effective users of ideas and information. The media and technology program makes available through the school's collections a wide range of print, non-print, and technology on varying levels of difficulty, with a diversity of appeal compatible with the different needs, interests, and viewpoints of students and teachers. To this end, the Moore County Schools Board of Education, in keeping with the ideas expressed in the Library Bill of Rights, asserts that the responsibility of the media program is as follows: to provide resources that will enrich and support the curriculum, taking into consideration the varied interests, abilities, socioeconomic backgrounds, learning styles, and developmental levels of the students served. 2, to provide resources that stimulate growth in factual knowledge, literary appreciation, aesthetic values, and ethical standards. 3, to provide a background of information enabling students to comprehend their role as citizens in society and to make intelligent judgments in their daily lives. 4, to provide resources on opposing sides of controversial issues so that students may develop under guidance the practice of critical thinking and of critical analysis of all media. 5, to provide resources representative of the many religious, ethnic, and cultural groups in our nation and the contributions of these groups to our American heritage. And 6, to place principle above personal opinion and reason above prejudice in selecting media of the highest quality in order to assure a comprehensive collection appropriate for all users. Then there's the criteria for selecting media and technology. In addition to the goals of the school improvement plan, consideration is given to individual teaching and learning styles, the curriculum, state, regional, and national standards, and the existing collection in determining needs for resources in individual schools. After a careful needs assessment, resources considered for purchase are judged on the basis of the following criteria: purpose, the overall purpose and its direct relationship to instructional objectives and curriculum; reliability, accurate, authentic, up-to-date, authoritative treatment; clear, skillful, well-organized, unbiased, comprehensive, well-balanced; technical quality, relevant to content, sound, and visuals consistent with state-of-the-art capabilities; format, well-organized, attractive, and appropriate; construction, durable, manageable; and possible uses: individual, small group, large group, introduction, in-depth study, remediation, enrichment. And then D focuses on the procedures for selecting and maintaining the media and technology collection. E is where we are really going to be focusing today, and those are the procedures for reconsideration of instructional resources. Occasional objections to some resources may be voiced by the public, despite the care taken in selection processes and despite the qualifications of persons selecting the resources. If a complaint is made, the following procedures should be observed. Each complaint will receive due process. Number one, the complainant is directed to discuss concerns with the staff member providing the resource in an attempt to resolve the issue informally. Number two, if the issue is not resolved, inform the complainant of the selection procedures and request that the complainant file his or her objections in writing by completing the request for the reconsideration of instructional resources form and submitting it to the building level media specialist. The challenge material shall be removed from the use of the student in question, but not from the use of other students during the review process. Number three, the school library media specialist will present the complaint to the building level media and technology advisory committee, and they will follow this process. Examine the item in its entirety and the objection or objections. Survey reviews of the item in professional reviewing sources. Determine the extent to which the item supports the curriculum. Weigh the merits against the alleged weaknesses, considering the whole item instead of isolated passages. Discuss the item and prepare a written report of the findings and recommendations of the committee. Send copies of the report to the principal and the Moore County Schools Chief Officer for Academics and Student Support Services or Media Supervisor and the complainant. The Chief Officer for Academics and Student Support Services or Media Supervisor should discuss the report with the superintendent, who may present it to the board. Number four, if the complainant is not satisfied, he or she may file a citizen's request for review of building level recommendation with the Moore County Schools Board of Education. The board will appoint a community media and technology advisory committee. The committee shall consist of the superintendent or his or her designee, the media supervisor or his or her designee, a library media specialist and teacher from each level of school within the system, elementary, middle, high school, a principal from each level of school within the system, a parent community member from each level of the school within the system, a parent from the school with which the challenge originates, at least one high school student. Following the process outlined above, the community level committee will re-examine all documentation from the original reconsideration decision. They will prepare a written report of their findings and recommendation and report directly to the Moore County Schools Board of Education. In accordance with GS 115C98, the local board at all times has sole authority and discretion to determine whether a challenge has merit and whether challenge material should be retained or removed. So once again, went through that in detail this time because it's the first time that we are together. We will not go through that level of detail in the future meetings. So what we're going to do now is we are going to take a look at, and we're going to have to take a moment for me to go back to the agenda. I'm going to turn this over to Donna Gephardt, who is going to go through the overall overview of the initial request and recommendation, as well as the complaint for district review.
So as Ms. Thomas went over, she thoroughly went over what the process was. So on December 15th, and she'll open this up, we received a request for reconsideration of instructional resources. The item that was being that was to be re-looked at was George, which was a book by Alex Gino. It happened to be in two of our media centers, Union Pines and Mcdeeds Creek. Per policy, as soon as this request from the complainant came in, we immediately pulled those from the library resources, and so that students were not able to check them out. The copyright of this book is 2015. It is not part of a set. If you'll go down, you will see that the complainant has made the objection that it is not the government's business to introduce children to transgenderism, sex changes, blockers, cross-dressing, internet porn, or LGBTQ lifestyles. That is a personal family business and should be up to parents. Children should make their own decisions when they are adults. To answer the question of what do you feel might be a result of a student reading this, about half of Moore County students can't read or write at grade level. Less than 6% of Black students are able to read or write at grade level. The school should be focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic and science. Are you aware of any evaluations of this item? Yes was the answer to that. And if yes, what was the source of your opinion? And that was Lieutenant Governor Robinson. Says, do you want any other person in the community to determine the kind of materials your child may or may not use in school? And the answer was yes, parents, grandparents, and taxpayers should be involved in education. Says, I would like to know how this book made it into Moore County schools as another comment. Did someone specifically order the book? If so, who ordered it? So that was the initial complaint. That on December 15th, when we received that complaint, we then forwarded this to Union Pines principal and librarian, as well as Mcdeeds Creek principal and librarian. Of course, as you realize, that was a couple days before Christmas break. So we allowed the team to have a review time to go through it, get their committees together. So they had to have an official report to the district on January the 19th. If you will look at the Mcdeeds Creek report, they went through a committee. They had their media person, a guidance counselor, administrator, an academic coach, a teacher assistant, and 2 parents as well. They read the book in its entirety, and she has looked at several resources that she consulted. And the committee recommendation, so I'm going to read that. The committee recommends that the book George remain in the Mcdeeds Creek Media Center in the upper Lexile reading level of the fiction section. Their justification cited that based on the policy, that it meets the criteria of the media review policy that Ms. Thomas went over with you under item B and C. They also went in that being part of the national schools capturing kids' heart at Mcdeeds Creek, that they worked carefully with students about book selection, and that this, as a whole child school award winner, that an ASCD recognizes Mcdeeds Creek met more than the educational needs of their student, but also met the social and emotional needs of their students. So Mcdeeds Creek submitted that they would like to have the book remain in their media center due to the justifications that I just shared with you. Ms. Thomas will now pull up the committee report from Union Pines High School. Again, this book was reviewed by an arts department, someone from the arts department, someone from the EC department, the science department, history department, English department, and their media specialist. They looked at what the objections were that the claimant made, and the committee read the book in its entirety, and their recommendation on page 2, after they looked at some resources. This report is being made after reading, researching, and reviewing the novel George by Alex Gino. After examining the book for the high school perspective, George by Alex Gino is age appropriate and supports diverse representation in the library collection. It is our recommendation that George by Alex Gino should not be removed from the Union Pines School Library. The overall message, their justification, the overall message, they felt like the points to the objectives to George were infrequent and not in detail. The majority of the book focuses on an anti-bullying message and self-discovery. Looking at the book as a whole, it presents a positive message and age appropriate for high school students. They go on to justify the diverse representation in the library. and that George contributes to the school library mission of providing access to diverse points of view, diverse home life situations, bullying, and the LGBTQ communities are represented in the work. They continue to go on that it is not required reading, again, as part of their justification, but is available for those who are interested in reading it independently. Students may freely choose whether to read George or not, and are always encouraged to find books that fit their interests. Students may return any books that they dislike or find conflicting to their views. And then they recognize that the reading level, and the last piece of that George is a lower reading level than high school and is recommended by School Library Journal for middle school libraries. However, the book addresses current issues and topics that are discovered by high schools, that are discussed by high school students. Many of our students read at that level and need access to these materials at their skill level that are high interest. So our two committee reports were pulled together and summarized, and a letter was sent to the complainant on January 21st that just sort of pulled together the information from the two reports, as well as attaching the two reports from the school to the complainant. And as a result, we then get, at the end of that week, we received the review. So he had opportunity to go through this. We provided all documentation to the complainant. And then the next week, we received the request for review of building level recommendation, which means now that we've gone from, as Melody went over, step 3, now we are at step 4 of the process, which requires the Media Technology Committee that you guys serve on. As Melody scrolls down, you will see that the aspects of this decision that you are requesting to be reviewed, it states that it introduces children to porn and clearing their browsers, genital mutilation with scissors, gender dysphoria, does not address the diversity of needs, interests, and viewpoints of students. The complainant goes on to show some, to give additional information. We will look at the attachments in a moment. It also says, the only reason someone would want to introduce children to internet porn and clearing their browsers after an internet search is because they're a pedophile that wants to groom young children. An additional comment was teaching children about androgen blockers and sex changes before they're even taught the basics of human biology and anatomy should be a crime. The next documentation that our complainant provided are excerpts from the book, and I won't read those to you, but you'll see that several excerpts and spots from the book have been added to the complaint. Give you a second to look over those. And the final pages of the complaint were actually from Common Sense Media, which is a review of the book. This is the age recommendation that the Common Sense Media provides. Then Common Sense Media actually goes into the value of the book that they feel as a value of the book. You'll see the places there that award the positive message, positive role models, language, etc., and the rating there. So the more dots that are colored in means that Common Sense Media found it a value, that it had higher rating on that. It also goes in Common Sense Media to talk to us about what the story is about, what parents need to know, and then what the story is about. So, and then things that you could talk to your kids about. So all of this was part of the complainant's response. So as a committee, we have to look at all the things that he maintained and commented on, and then as Ms. Thomas commented, with the direction of this committee is to look at the book in its entirety. So Ms. Thomas, are you going to go over just quickly what we will be doing as we look at the Padlets?
Yes. So this brings us to step 4. And that is the committee input referencing the procedures for the committee to address the reconsideration of instructional resources. So as we begin discussing, and we will, as we said, have the option of you may verbally share, ask questions. We want everybody to feel very comfortable. You also have the option to respond in the Padlet. So either one of those are options, and we will be reading aloud the information in the Padlet so we can all hear what is there. So once again, we'll be examining the item in its entirety and the objections. We'll survey reviews of the item and professional reviewing sources. And we already had in the request the common sense review. What we've also included here are additional book reviews from professional organizations. And so you've got Book List, you've got Horn Book Magazine, Kirkus Reviews, Publishers Weekly, School Library Journal. I do want to pause here for a moment to see if there are any other reviews that anybody wanted to share. Okay, and I want to make it very clear at any point that somebody wants to share something, you're welcome to do that. But I didn't want to just assume that the reviews here were the only ones that people may have used. Marshall.
It's actually Lee, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
I don't know why it's under my son's name. And I'm not sure when to ask the question, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. So, but I had a couple questions while reviewing a lot of the information. I was curious, it sounds like, and I don't know if you say MTAC for short, for the Media Technology Advisory Committee. When I was reading the policy and the selection procedure, my understanding, and we kind of skimmed over that first part of it, is that there was actually a committee that consisted of the media specialist at each school, some department heads, or some people that were representing a specific department, either English, history, so forth, and then a parent at each, like elementary, middle school, and high school. And so I just wanted to understand that that's in place each year because, I mean, I was just recently asked to be on this committee, so I just want to clarify how that works. And then also when, and if that's correct, when, like what year the book was approved for the library selection. I wasn't able to find that information.
And I am actually going to, because we're looking at Mcdeeds, which is a new school, I am going to actually ask Mr. Metcalf, Dr. Metcalf, I'm sorry, or Gephardt to address that.
So, Ms. White, the Mcdeeds Creek, because it was a brand new library and there was no librarian in place, they actually reached out to the book company that many of our librarians use to get the books and to get a warehouse of books brought in. So these are books that a vetted committee in the book company that they use actually went through, sorted through books, looked at the time. You heard Melody mention Part D, which is about timely of books. So they actually built a library collection for us to go through and to put into the Mcdeeds Creek Library. So that was put in 2019 when the school opened, of all the books that they had. The book was actually purchased in the April of 2021 at Union Pines High School. So the book was more recently purchased at Union Pines. But again, it came in as part of the original shipment from the book company as Mcdeeds was building their media center.
Okay, and is that book company Scholastic, or is that only because I know that's where?
It's typically, they use various places, but like Permabound is one area that they purchase books from. Okay. They purchase from different like Follett brings in sets. So they get books from a lot of places. The publisher of this book is Scholastic, but that's all part of that Permabound group that's as they go through. So all the books that you would find, regardless of publisher, could be found at Permabound, and then those are shipped to the media specialist.
All right, great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this point? Okay.
So go ahead, Melody.
Okay. So the next part, and actually, Don, I guess you could have just taken this part because I know you were going to address the curriculum. Determine the extent to which the item supports the curriculum.
So we attached the North Carolina Standard Course of Study, a link out to all curriculum areas. But as we look at the ELA curriculum, Standard 10 under Reading Literature states that children have the opportunity to read at grade level material. So Standard 10 addresses at grade level material for ELA. We also know that within within social studies, we talk about the different diversity of our America throughout the social studies curriculum. Healthful living is also another curriculum that this text aligned to. Healthful living talks about your mental health, goes over how you mature, gets into how you adjust into the environment that you have, living a healthy lifestyle. And then as we look at science, of course, we definitely get into the science curriculum addresses the human body parts, etc. So it does align with various curriculum standards throughout our North Carolina Standard Course of Study.
And then part D is to, once again, weigh the merits against the alleged weaknesses, considering the whole item instead of isolated passages. And these alleged weaknesses are listed in the request for building level review. So we've linked that there again for everybody to have easy access. So our goal now is to have conversation, answer questions, as well as use the Padlet for those of you who would prefer to post in the Padlet. And so I think Ms. Gephardt was going to actually post the link to the Padlet in the chat bar.
I just did, Ms. Thomas. So for those of you that see the link, if you go to the chat bar at the bottom, you will see a link that takes you to a Padlet. If you click on that link, you will have a new screen come up. And for those that aren't familiar with Padlet, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner a little plus sign. That plus sign, if you click on it, I believe it's a double click on the plus sign, you'll be able to get a typing area up. You can put a subject in, or you can just go down to write something, and you could give us feedback on your thoughts as it relates to the merit of the book against the overall merit of the book. So you're definitely able to use the Padlet to provide us with information. And again, you just double click on that pink plus sign, and you'll get your opportunity for you to be able to type.
Ms. Thomas, to confirm, we're focused just at the book placement in the Media Center at Mcdeeds Creek. We're not talking about Union Pines in this particular Padlet. It's about the appropriateness of the book at Mcdeeds Creek Elementary School.
Today is a complete focus. I know we looked at a couple of materials about the other request, but right now we are focused on the elementary school.
Thank you.
I have a question, Donna.
Yes, sir.
Is the design of this period to be both Padlet and speaking?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, and I'm actually, if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and display the Padlet. I wanted to leave the information up so everybody could look at the criteria, but would you like me to go ahead and pull the Padlet up as you talk, or what would be your preference?
Melody, I think everybody can see the Padlet, so if you just want to, if you want to pull it up, but there are 3 dots that will make it, you need to make it full screen so that we just see the Padlet responses.
Okay.
So if you pull it up.
I think we need to do that so that can be observed.
Yeah. Just make sure you go to the 3 dots there in the corner and make it full screen.
What I want to say is that I think there's a narrow concern just about I did mark that down in the Library Bill of Rights, number 1, developmental levels of students served. And I think that's the issue, is what I don't have any notes or minutes about the discussions they had at the elementary school level at Mcdeeds with this, but there are some components of that book that do cause some concern for certainly the younger kids in K-5. And if we're going to talk about something, rather than everybody just kind of timidly sitting on our hands about it, that's really where we should have a robust discussion about that. So at least we kind of feel like we fleshed it out a little bit. I don't know. That's what I'm getting from the comments. And when I've talked to some folks about this book, you know, should an 8-year-old have access to this book, and what does that lead to, and those kind of things. And so I just, that's where I think we should have the discussion.
And Sean, I noticed that again, is what you were saying, I noticed that the reviews were all over the place. So I noticed there were some that specifically said, and somebody did ask, is it correct that the Kirkus says 912, and it does, and that the library review, the school library does recommend the book for middle school.
Yes, that actual comment came from me, Donna. And I guess the question that may be best suited to answer maybe by you, Sean, or the media specialists, is how do you, if the book is designed maybe for upper elementary, your 4th and 5th grade, how do we, with any book, how do we control that a 1st grader or 2nd grader isn't choosing that, or is that acceptable that they choose that? I'm just not sure how that works necessarily in an elementary school setting.
Well, Mike, I'm thinking, because I actually put in, I'm not very comfortable with it being a K-3 book, although the Lexile level would be appropriate for many students. Having taught elementary, I know there are students within K-3 who can certainly read at this level and higher. I think that the topics in there have value for some older kids, but I do think that younger students are just perhaps not ready to digest it. In terms of being able to control that, when I think about having worked in an elementary or middle school, the librarian or the media assistant usually checks the books out for students. And just as they help students align their Lexile to what they're checking out, when they pull a student up, if they pull up Jenny Purvis, they're going to see what grade I'm in. And so if this were to be a book that our committee felt, hey, this is not appropriate for whatever grades is decided, then the media specialist would have to at that time say, honey, this book is not for your grade level. And they would choose again, is just my thought. Because I do know that, we have libraries that are K-5. So there would have to kind of be a process for that, I suppose.
Well, and then there's also the question, is it appropriate for 4th and 5th grade? I mean, just that's exactly the narrow part that we want to talk. I have not spoken to, yeah, I've spoken to people just generally about this, just trying to get some feedback. We have plenty of teachers that are both parents and teachers, and have been here a long time. And that is a question mark.
And I think that's a fine line, Sean. Having taught elementary and then I taught middle school, so I've taught fourth grade, fifth grade, I've taught kindergarten and first and second, and then had high school. I think you'll find fourth and fifth graders, some who are mature enough to handle this and read it and look at the good parts of it. I think there are some kids in fourth and fifth grade who may not be mature enough, but I think that's the case wherever we are and wherever books are. You're always going to have that small group, and I'm not sure how to really, if you take it out for those that are not, then you're giving those who could read it, you're not giving them an opportunity. So I think you're right. That's the area that everybody probably is getting hung up on.
Well, and then my final, it's not even close to my final thought, but an additional thought is that there was a process in place at the school, a robust process at Mcdeeds, and they went through a very robust process with their parents and their faculty and their administration, and they made a determination. I'm just not sure if what additional angle this body might have to override the decision from that school that was completely aligned with board policy procedures. That's kind of my biggest stance here, to be honest with you.
I do have something to say as a parent of a fifth grader. The things that my daughter comes back to me from what is being told to her by other fourth and fifth graders just who have simply access to the whole open internet is more concerning to me than something that is written in this book. She has come to me with non-factual information because parents don't control or guide their children on what they have access to. This book is written in a way that gives you compassion and understanding of someone else. And I just don't think that their maturity level should be questioned because they have open access to everything else that parents are allowing them to.
I think that's a very good point. And I will say, if you take out almost exactly the exact quotes that were in the complaint, almost literally, then it really is just a story about a kid managing life with some uncomfortable, bullying, whatever you want to call it, toward him, some bullies giving attention to the main character and kind of overcoming that. It really is.
I agree. 99% of the book is really about empathy and compassion, and it is. And as a parent, you're right. Kids have access on their phones to everything.
I also found that it was a good discussion about body dysmorphia and self-esteem, because I know kids that are transgender typically have that low self-esteem and body dysmorphia. So I thought that would be a good angle to take that book.
And on the flip end of that, if you have a student who is K3, parents should be monitoring what kids check out. I would hope that as a parent, you're seeing what your kindergarten through third grader is reading. And if the parent doesn't want them to have it, I suppose they could turn it back in.
I would say there's some safeguards, at least here, K5, where you have the gatekeeper, the media specialist is a gatekeeper, and then the teacher is a gatekeeper, and then the parent is the main gatekeeper. So you kind of have three levels that you have to kind of pass through. And I know it's less intense in fifth grade, but certainly in kindergarten and first and second grade, everybody knows what's in, every adult around that child knows what's in that bag.
I'd like to say, as the gatekeeper at the elementary school, I'm the media specialist at Sandhills Farm Life, that I reached out to Follett, who our software's through, to find out what we could do as far as flagging a book, if that ended up being appropriate. And we can flag an item so that when the child scans it or the book is scanned, it says this book needs approval, but we can't stop the child from checking it out for approval if they do self-checkout. But I know at my school and other elementary schools and middle schools, before COVID, we did pretty regularly. The kids had open checkout where they had their library cards. They could check in and check out as they needed to. So without setting it as a separate circulation type, like you would a reference book, that would require a password to be put in, there's really no way to stop them from checking out. If we go back, I mean, we're not doing self-checkout right now, but God willing, we will soon. We'll be able to have kids, coming in, going more on their own. So I think that's my concern with flagging and leaving it up to the gatekeeper for those 8-year-olds. It's not always something we can catch when we're doing that, when we're using that kind of a policy. And I know other elementary schools besides myself that were doing self-checkout.
Is there a way for the parents who do have concerns about this book to put it on some kind of ban for their children / children in their schools? Yeah, so it's like this one book cannot be checked out at all by my kids.
And I have parents that have asked, their children not check out graphic novels, or their children not check out more than one book. And there's a way to flag that student so that when he comes up to the computer and he scans his card, an alert comes up immediately. Again, if there's not an adult standing there to override it, it doesn't matter. And there isn't always. But if there is one, that alert does pop up. But then you'd have to survey every parent in the school to get that information. That book's still going to go home until you can do that. So, that's why I said the circulation type that would require a password would be really the only way to prevent that, to set it up in that manner for that item. And then you kind of get into, even though parents have with the Privacy Act and everything, that's a little, what word I'm looking for, but we have some leeway there with depending on their age. I don't know. It gets sticky. So I don't know if Melanie has anything to add to that or not, but for elementary school, we know we can't, the parents do have rights. But, I don't know if I don't know how comfortable I am calling a parent every time a child wants to check out that book, and I have to, before I can put in that password, I have to call up, Susie's parents or John's parents and say, well, your child wanted to check out this book. That does infringe on some rights. Parents have a right to that, but it's still, with FERPA and all that kind of stuff, it makes you feel a little unethical that way too. So it's, who are you protecting? So it's a tough place to be.
And what was the acronym you just referenced? I didn't understand what you meant.
The FERPA, I actually printed it out so I have it in front of me. The family, it stands for sorry, lots of pages.
Ms. Blake, is it the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That's kind of what we kind of try to protect. I had there it is. establishes explicit rights to privacy for students and minors' educational records, but at the same time grants school officials with legitimate educational interests and parents access to and oversight over student records that weakens these privacy rights. And then that's where the American Library Association comes in with guidelines to provide school libraries with information about security practices in respect to student use of library collections to strengthen their privacy and protection. But when you've got, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, parents have those rights. And that's where we get into difficulties, I think.
So is that, and I'm sorry because I'm not familiar with the act, so I'll definitely read that after this call.
Yeah.
Is this Privacy Act something that protects, because the way I understood it when you first mentioned it, it protects the students' rights, or is it actually protecting the parents' rights?
I think it's to protect everybody. Is to protect the students' rights, but it also allows for parents access to and oversight over student records. But it is to protect students' rights for their privacy. Like I'm not supposed to say, out loud to anybody what to other children, especially, what children are checking out. It's supposed to be. Ethically, as professionals, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to protect their privacy and what they have access to.
And Catherine, I'm going to jump in and say, because you referenced the Library Bill of Rights, Article 7 of the Library Bill of Rights states all people, regardless of origin, age, background, or views, possess a right to privacy and confidentiality in their library use.
Regardless of age.
And so I believe that's what you were referencing with FERPA.
Yeah, I'm trying. Thank you,
So
Melody.
the children so basically what I'm hearing is they have the right to privacy on what they check out in the library. So
yeah.
Basically they're able to check out books without the parents knowing.
I don't think that's what it says. I think that's what they wish. But it says at the same time grants school officials and parents access to and oversight over student records, and that weakens the privacy rights according to FERPA.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit. I think a parent has the rights to all the child's record. That is referring to, we can't tell another child what another child is checking out. Or I can't just go to any teacher and tell somebody what that kid is checking out unless it's educationally necessary. But a parent should be able to have access to every single record that's involved with the child's life. I don't want us to misconstrue that. That's my understanding of, and that's the way we roll here. But I just want to,
accurate.
That right is to protect the child, and the parent is connected to that child completely and utterly. So I just want to make sure that's crystal clear. That's how I understand it. Dr. Metcalf understands it that way as well.
Yeah.
One last thing. It is a burden on any employee to have to constantly call a parent for small things that are just supposed to be like a kid picks a particular chocolate milk and the parent doesn't want him to drink chocolate milk. We can't call the parent every time. It's getting into that place where now we're on the hook if you missed it because you turned your head and the kid got a chocolate milk. We can't call the parent every time. I would go along that same line. Thousands of books are in there, and it wouldn't be reasonable to have an expectation for 500, 600, 700 kids to have to monitor and flag and talk to parents. So we shouldn't set it up for that problem. It's kind of where we were going with that from the media specialist. If I'm wrong, somebody can kind of correct.
It sounds like what Ms. Blake is saying is it would be very hard in what you're saying to control the fidelity of us monitoring such a process. If we can't ensure fidelity, then we're going to make a mistake at some point in time with 600, 700 children. I mean, we're human. So if there's no way to ensure that that's in place, that's something we shouldn't set people up to expect.
Yeah, especially when I go back to doing self-checkout, they're checking themselves out, and I've got 30 other children over here that I'm teaching a class to, because as elementary school media specialists, we teach classes all day long. and take care of the computers coming in the door. And that's why we have self-checkout, so they can still have access to the media center when we are doing the other things that we do. So that's going to be really hard. And like I said, when that alarm goes off and says this kid can't check out graphic novels, or this kid can't check out George, other kids are going to come run and look at that screen and say, well, I made that alarm go off. That's reality. That's not fidelity.
Right, that's what I'm understanding.
So, and my youngest is now in 8th grade, so I have to try to put myself back into the elementary grades, and I'm just, my initial thought. So I started reading the book, and then we got the supporting information. So then I went back and started reading the supporting information, and I'm not, it's obvious according to the selection procedure and what we read over today that the book meets that criteria. Me personally, and I have an 8th grade son, me personally would not want him when he was in elementary school to read this book. Those are topics that I would like to discuss, and we do discuss, in our home setting. Now, I'm very well aware that not every home is as open with communication as we are. So my initial thought after reading the book, and obviously everything else, is the burden on this media specialist, like we've been discussing, having to monitor the younger kids versus the older kids. And if you have children that are wanting to explore or read this type of book or are having issues at school, I mean, my first thought was, is that where the guidance counselor can step in? Can this book be in their library? Because I know I think there's special libraries that the teachers can access, their personal libraries. And I don't know if that has to go through an approval process. I'm just trying to think of an alternative. But then again, like I said, what I saw, yes, it definitely meets the criteria for the policy, but I don't necessarily agree with the developmental level of the children being able to access that.
I think your sentiment's probably shared by a lot of people.
And I struggle, Ms. White, with what you said in reading through all of the documents. It's clearly aligned to the process that should be gone through to be selected. So then I question, as Mr. Krinsecki said, who are we to go against what's been set forth by not only the board, but then the Library of Congress and everything else in terms of selection? How do we then override it and say we're not going to let them select it, even though we may not agree with it being appropriate for K-3? That's where I'm balancing, is that, although personally I may not want my kindergarten, first, second grader to check it out, these other governing bodies have set forth the guidelines, and how do we go against all of these governing bodies that have set forth the guidelines, because clearly it is in alignment with that.
I have a question to piggyback off of what Mrs. White said, was if there is a library that is in the guidance counselor's office, say that that's where it ends up. If a student who is struggling with this type of situation in their life and they don't feel comfortable going to the guidance counselor, is there a way for them to get that book without having to notify anybody? Or no?
I don't know of any specialized process to have counselors with books. I don't see that as a pervasive plan whatsoever. So I don't know if we need to get down in that discussion. I think no matter what, I just want to be clear, if there's any discussions about any of this, whether it's from a guidance counselor or a teacher, principal, the parent's going to get involved immediately. That's a best practice that anybody who's works in elementary ed knows and understands and upholds intensely. I mean, even if a child says something a little off that day, we make our best effort to contact the parent and have a clear communication. So I think if there is any situation, regardless, the parent's going to get involved on the ground floor immediately. And if there was a concern about a book, that's when that book would be kind of discussed, and the parent has full and absolute authority. You know, they do whatever they do with their kid. Doesn't want the kid to have the book. The kid's not going to have the book. It's the end of the discussion. That's the thing we need to discuss, though. We've kind of just circled around it. Is if it meets a stringent policy, the only place that I think that narrowly could be argued is the developmental level of the students served. I believe firmly that there is a strong argument to suggest that 8, 9-year-olds or 10-year-olds even with the book in their hands would not be able to really appreciate that book without some sort of, talk through. And then who's going to do that talk through if it's not developmentally appropriate for that age? And is it the school's purview to do that at that age? And there's an argument to say that's a parent's purview. Certainly it's not necessarily something that the school would engage in. And so that to me is the narrow discussion. And then the only thing that balances that for me is the fact that this has already been hashed out locally following the policy, which was a group that looks very similar to us, but narrowly at that school, which would make it more germane, and they voted to keep the book. It really is, those are the two competing things in my head as far as what this body should do. Recommend, what this body should recommend. We don't do anything, we just recommend.
So I agree completely, Mr. Konsicki. I think it is about the developmental appropriateness. And I think the concern for me is how wide varying some of the research indicates that the book is appropriate for, from high school, 9 through 12, to middle school, which certainly isn't 4th or 5th graders, and obviously not 3rd or 2nd, to very upper level middle school. It's all over the place. And I tried to pull some beyond just what Mcdeeds Creek noted that they looked at. So I looked at the New York Times, I looked at some of the others that had done reviews of the book. And it seemed, I was surprised that it was, that there was such disagreement on what age group that the book might be appropriate for. And that frankly concerned me. And I think is by looking wider than Mcdeeds Creek did, looking at more of those resources, made me feel a little bit more comfortable, maybe challenging where they landed.
Well, and as a middle school principal, I was actually surprised that it wasn't in a middle school library. It's kind of this, what we sort of call this coming of age transition where we explore. And, really there's no set age at which that really occurs. I'm not as familiar with elementary because I've never worked or taught or been in elementary, but I could definitely see middle schoolers checking this out and exploring the topics. I don't know, 4th and 5th grade, but I kind of echo Sean's sentiments in that, Mcdeeds Creek, they do know their children and their needs, and so maybe that weighed into their decision as to whether or not they're, they've got some kids that would be developmentally ready and possibly exploring those topics of gender identity.
And so I strongly believe in wait time. I believe in everybody being able to share anything that you need to share. What I want to do right now is just kind of give you an idea of where we'll go from here. And then we can see what additional questions people have or additional feedback. So what we will be doing once we feel that it's time is we will each be voting in the chat to say that you either believe that the book, somebody can correct me, Skepart, if, but either keep or remove. So we'll either.
This is just a preliminary feel, you know, with the final report that Ms. Thomas was talking about will not be done until, I think we'll bring it back to the committee on the 24th. So this is just sort of where you are right now with just thinking about the elementary school, to keep it or remove it in the chat, just to get a little idea. That doesn't mean you can't come back in Tuesday and change your mind and say, oh, we thought about it, researched it some more. You've had a lot of great conversation today. So Ms. Thomas, I think that would be a fair statement, is let's just, what are you sort of thinking today? And then following back up on knowing that you might say this today, and Tuesday you may come in and say, you know what, I was wrong about this or this. So we definitely will value that.
I have two questions. Can I just
sorry, Sean.
throw mine in real quick? Are we voting to remove it from Moore County Schools elementary level buildings? Or are we voting to remove it from McDeeds Creek? And second part of this is, if we vote to keep it at McDeeds, is there anything that stops a local school, so West End, is there anything to stop a parent reintroducing a request to remove it from West End, and we have a local committee which would contradict maybe, perhaps, McDeeds? In other words, is there a scenario where you could have the book accepted at McDeeds Creek and not allowed to be at West End Elementary? I'm just asking to see where we're going with this, because that could impact a decision in terms of overall.
You looking for me to answer that, Ms. Gephardt?
Well, I got distracted because there was a really good question that popped up on the Padlet of, is this book in Moore County Public Library? So I think that's definitely something, I think it is, but it's something we can definitely confirm. So that's a really good question. But yes, Dr. Metcalf, I do believe Mr. Krinsicki's question is this for all elementary libraries, what we vote to do today, or is it just McDeeds?
Local decision at each school. The books are locally decided by school, and so this decision is about McDeeds. That being said, not that we've been through this many times in the past, we did have a book at the high school level recently that was pulled at the first stage of the policy, and when that was pulled at that stage, we did notify each of the other high schools that school had made that decision, and that influenced them to not bring the book back. It's not that they couldn't, but we would take an extra look at it at that particular site. That may be playing both ends of it, but yes, it's a local decision. So yes, theoretically, next week, your media specialist at West End Elementary could decide that they want to bring that book in, knowing that it had, been pulled at another school, and all our media technology specialists will be made aware of that. Would really want to look at why we were choosing to do that. You have to be a very thoughtful decision why we would want to pull it at one school and not at another, or bring it back at another. But by policy, it could happen that way, yes.
And I just had a follow-up question, and maybe we don't know the answer. I feel like I might have heard this somewhere, but do we know how many times the book was checked out by, let's say, kindergarten through 5th grade at each level? Do we have that information?
We can definitely get that right now because it was pulled. I can give you the specifics to that from, but I'll have to get that and bring it back to our next meeting.
So there's a question in the chat, and that is, may our Moore County Schools Board of Education remove book titles from individual schools?
Yeah, they have full authority to pull books from any school or all schools. So the board could take our recommendation. Our recommendation may be to pull it from McDeeds Creek, and our Board of Education could make a motion to ensure that it's not in any of our schools. They could take our recommendation. We may have a recommendation to pull it, and the Board of Education could say, no, we don't agree with that. We're good with it staying. The board has ultimate authority.
And someone was very able to get onto the Moore County library system and did find out that there are 5 out of 6 copies checked out right now from the public library system.
So once again, the process would be at this point, or at the point that we are ready, to have everybody either choose to say keep or remove, and that's good clarification. That would be for McDeeds Creek Elementary School. So we're only focusing on the elementary school. At that point, we would work on a report that we would bring back to the committee on Tuesday with the understanding that it is a preliminary report. Everybody will get the chance to review the report, make recommendations of anything that needs to be changed. And Ms. Gephardt mentioned that if in any way you wanted to change your vote, you're saying at that point that could be done.
Yes, ma'am.
It simply allows folks to have some time to do some reflection and to process what's been discussed here. We've had a great conversation and really appreciate the willingness and the courage to share your thoughts and ideas and perspectives. And as I said at the beginning, everybody comes from a different background, so we all have different perspectives, which is great. It's one of the reasons you were all selected for this committee by the board. We wanted to provide some time for your own thought process and consider what everybody has said here today. And so we're doing the straw vote to kind of get a feel for where folks are at. We'll use that to help compile this report, but then provide an opportunity to come back to the table in case we're in a different place based on what we've learned today or what you might learn in the next coming days.
So another question that has been brought up in the chat is, do we send our vote to everyone or a specific person?
Dr. Baker.
That's a great question. If you can send it to me, it'll come directly to me, and I'll compile those. Obviously, we won't announce those today because it's just a straw vote. We'll be doing that when we compile the report and everybody feels comfortable with it. And we do have 2 more meetings, I think, Ms. Thomas. The next meeting, we're really focusing on Union Pines and the book being there. And then the last meeting is really to come together, kind of review the report and make sure everybody's comfortable with it. We're in a good place from there.
And for clarification, the next meeting, we will start with a preliminary report of from today.
That would be our goal, is to try to have some stuff pulled together for you to look over. But again, remember, we're just sort of getting a straw vote from the group, and then we will definitely come back. For those of you who might not be familiar with Zoom, you will go to in the chat, you'll go down and where it says everybody, that little drop down menu, you'll go directly to M. Metcalf to be able to send him your keep it in our Mcdeeds Creek or remove it. And Ms. Thomas, you'll now follow up on how many times it has been checked out at Mcdeeds and Union Pines, and we'll maybe update that, update you guys in the email as we send out the next Zoom link for our meeting.
So Dr. Metcalf, I don't think we want to end the meeting until we know that you have the information that you need.
That's right. I want to make sure that I'm getting ready to lock the Padlet down to private. So if you want to add anything else to the Padlet, please do so before we close out of the meeting today.
You unmute. I think I have everything I need, Ms. Thomas. Thank you very much. Appreciate the committee, and thank you for your work. 90 minutes, and so that's a long day. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you all.
We will not take the same amount of time to go over everything at the beginning at the next meeting. We will have gone over that.
And remind them that the next meeting is at 4:30, so we did a little bit later to accommodate travels. We again thank our parents and principals and teachers and media specialists for hanging in here. So thank you so much.
And Carson too, student hung in there the whole 90 minutes. Appreciate you, Carson.
I expected a high school senior to be rolling here. Carson, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next week.